Capturing the 1950 to 1990 migration from the Indian subcontinent, covering countries such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, is important as this is a forgotten period of history held in a generation which is dying. This generation is a part of British history, and is a story that is rarely told despite addressing the UK's post-war labour shortage and contributing to the economy and enriching British society with its cultural diversity. The migrants are pioneers who led the way for the millions of sub-Indian migrants who live here today. From 1947 to 1970, almost 500,000 people from the sub-Indian continent relocated to Britain in search for a better life, and their primary goal was to create better opportunities for themselves and their children. Some of the migrants planned to work in Britain for a short period of time and return back home. In the years following World War II and the dissolution of the British Empire, there was an increase in migration to the UK during the 50s and the 60s. The migrants from India, Pakistan and Bangladesh responded to the British government's request for employees in the transportation, postal and healthcare industries. This was because Britain was struggling to recover from the devastation of World War II and required workers to aid in its economic recovery. Some of the migrants who came to Britain were former servicemen from the Second World War, recruited from British colonies in the Caribbean. One of the moments which is considered to be the start of this period of mass migration was the arrival of the Empire Windrush. The migrants were welcomed to Britain with tabloids using the headline "Welcome Home," which has certainly changed over the period of the migration. During the late 50s and 60s, a significant influx of workers from regions like Bengal, Punjab and Gujarat in India came to the UK. Many of them found employment in the boundaries of the English Midlands. A substantial number of Gujaratis were employed in the textile manufacturing sector in various northwest industrial towns, including Blackburn, Dewsbury, Bolton, Lancaster, Manchester and Preston. Sikhs who migrated to London tended to set up their business in the east, where the wholesale, retail and manufacturing aspects of the textile industry were concentrated. Others settled in West London, taking up jobs at Heathrow Airport, associated industries, as well as in the plants and factories of major brands. Simultaneously, the newly established National Health Service, NHS, in the UK recruited medical staff from India, particularly those who had received training from British standard medical schools in the Indian subcontinent. During the 60s and 70s, a substantial number of East African Indians, mainly Gujaratis and also some Punjabis, who also held British passports, arrived in the UK after being expelled from Kenya, Uganda and Zanzibar. Many of these individuals had been storekeepers and wholesale retailers in Africa and subsequently opened shops upon their arrival in the UK. In 2001, East African Indians comprised around 16% of the total British Indian population. At the start of the migration, there was an estimated total of 31,000 British Indians. However, in the 90s, there was a total of 840,000 migrants, illustrating a 2,609% increase in migration during this period. Once the migrants found work and realised they could establish themselves in the UK, they informed relatives and friends of the opportunities available. This would include a better lifestyle, job opportunities, and Britain's newly formed NHS. The Ministry of Health had a tradition of recruiting nurses and domestic workers from the West Indies, whilst textile employers advertised in the Indian press. Once the tradition of migration was established, in conjunction with the violent and disruptive partition of India, it uprooted hundreds of thousands of more people from the Indian subcontinent and Punjabis to migrate to the UK. Migration rose and fell based on the needs of the British economy, indicating a link between levels of vacancies and migration. This was mainly facilitated due to the British Nationality Act 1948, which allowed for migration from the Commonwealth with minimal restrictions, with an open door policy to quickly build the economy back. Many migrants arrived in Britain with just £3, which is equivalent to £50 today, which would cover rent for just about a week. Most migrants were born under the British Raj, They imagined England was full of palaces and the streets were paved with gold. However, they were quite surprised when its ideology did not meet up to their expectations. Many lived in awful housing conditions and poverty, some even living with 28 other people in a 4-bed house, with 4 people to a bed and taking shifts as to who can sleep in them at a time. Many landlords stipulated no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. Generally, the migration in the early 50s, there was a goodwill towards migrants. However, as the numbers grew, people's perception changed. Here is an audio extract from Jilly Salvat as she remembers her journey when arriving in England from India shortly after the partition in 1948.
I have a vivid recollection of standing on the boat's railing as it departed from India. Both my parents were crying incessantly, and as India gradually receded into the distance, its lights grew fainter. At the time, I didn't fully comprehend the reason for their tears, but it became clear that they were weeping because they understood they would never see their homeland again. Upon our arrival in Tilbury, it was a gloomy, drizzly day. I recall the docking itself, but the journey to London escapes my memory. We were lodged in an immigrant camp situated in the basement of a church near Selfridges. The accommodations were reminiscent of a Dickensian setting, with men and boys in one section and women and girls occupying iron cots. English attendants, resembling warders, were tasked with maintaining order and discipline, as children were generally undesirable, especially those of different races, and even pets weren't welcomed, which often left us with limited options. My father explored London tirelessly, and the only store we were familiar with was Harrods, largely due to its prominence in magazines. Using some of their savings, my parents took us to Harrods, where they purchased warm overcoats for my sister and me, as we lacked suitable winter clothing. Passers-by on Oxford Street were unaccustomed to seeing people of color, and we would attract attention, with pedestrians stopping in their tracks to stare at us. It was an extraordinary and, in retrospect, amusing experience, quite different from today's norms. When I started school, my classmate relentlessly teased me because of my accent, mistakenly thinking I was an American Indian from the United States. Within a mere 3 weeks, I adapted my accent and learned to navigate this new environment in order to fit in and survive.
Many individuals who came to the UK initially didn't plan to stay permanently. However, after racial tensions erupted in 1958, which we will discuss further later on, the British government decided to restrict labour migration. This led to a significant reduction in the entry of workers from the new Commonwealth, partly due to the Commonwealth Immigrations Act of 1962, an economic slowdown in the UK. The 1962 Act limited workers from entry but allowed family members of existing migrants to immigrate, unintentionally turning temporary labour migration into permanent family settlement. Family reunion was further restricted by the 1971 Immigration Act. Subsequently, the 1981 Nationality Act removed British citizenship from Commonwealth citizens, placing further migrants from India on equal footing with entrants from anywhere else in the world. Therefore, migration from countries from the Indian subcontinent to Britain decreased. However, by this time, these communities had already established themselves in cities like London, Birmingham, and other various industrial towns in the UK. Indians tended to concentrate in specific areas due to chain migration, work opportunities, and affordable housing. In some instances, chain migration led to the recreation of village affiliations within specific urban neighbourhoods, resulting in segregation not only from the white population, but also between distinct Indian groups. Push and pull factors are concepts used in migration studies that explain why people migrate from one place to another. They help analyse the reasons behind migration decisions. Push factors are factors or conditions in a person's current location that compel or force them to leave. Push factors are essentially the reason people want to escape from their current situation. Common push factors for this migration include economic hardship and lack of job opportunities, political instability, conflict or persecution, and poor living conditions including a lack of access to basic services like healthcare and education. A major push factor in the migration were the scars of war and civil unrest. The Russian arbitrary partition of India by the British, which led to the creation of Pakistan, sowed the seeds for long-lasting conflicts across the subcontinent. The Bangladeshi War of Independence, where Bangladesh, formerly East Pakistan, broke free from Pakistan rule, and ongoing disputes over the Jammu and Kashmir territory have left parts of South Asia unsettled and at times in a state of war or major civil unrest. Pull factors are factors or conditions in a different location that attract or entice people to move there. Pull factors are essentially the appealing aspects of a new location that make it an attractive destination. Along with major pull factors such as better economic opportunities, higher wages, improved job prospects, safety and an overall higher standard of living, pull factors were majorly rooted in the UK's post-war labour needs. We have previously discussed the establishment of the NHS and the demand for skilled workers. However, there is a persistent narrative of migrants as a drain on national resources. There is also often a lack of willing British-born labour, and as a result, men from Bangladesh and Pakistan and Southeast Asia were directly recruited from rural areas to fill this gap. Migration decisions often result from a combination of both push and pull factors. Chain migration played a significant role. Once someone found work in the UK, they would send word to their relatives back home. Often those who were already employed in the UK would provide financial support to those in their home countries, enabling them to join their families in the UK. Changes in UK immigration policy were key factors in migration. Immigration to the UK was relatively open before the 1960s, as post-war UK urgently needed labour. However, the British Nationality Act of 1948, for example, granted British citizenship to anyone in the British Empire and Commonwealth at that time. Many Bangladeshis, Indians and Pakistanis were also UK citizens and entitled to travel to the UK. However, the Commonwealth Immigration Act of 1962 restricted Commonwealth immigration, and the Immigration Act of 1971 introduced further restrictions, especially regarding wives and children joining men who had previously migrated. There was a surge in South Asian migration to the UK leading up to the implementation of these laws, as people sought to migrate while they still could. However, despite these hardships, South Asian migrants displayed immense resilience, often supporting each other in times of need. Early on, this support took the form of interpersonal assistance. Communities also established their cultural and welfare organisations, including mosques and mandirs. They raised funds, and sometimes through half-crown contributions per family per week, and built their own places of worship, showcasing their resourcefulness. Beyond the challenges, South Asian migrants valued education as a means to secure a brighter future for their children. The UK's reasonably developed education system became an attractive proposition, offering opportunities not always available in their home countries. Amjad Malik arrived in the UK from Pakistan and notes that her father wanted his children to have the best education and believed that England offered the best social system and education in the world at that time. Cultural adaptation was another crucial aspect of South Asian migration. Coming from rural areas or small towns, migrants encountered stark contrasts between our homelands and urban British environments. The cold, damp weather and the absence of colourful landscapes were notable adjustments. Family bonds and mutual support were integral to the migrant experience. Balat Ali shares how one person working in a household supported many unemployed family members, a practice common amongst Kashmiris. Testimonials from migrants in the 50s explain how they did shifts that the indigenous population didn't want to do. In 1962, the Commonwealth Immigrants Act and the following Immigration Act of 1971 restricted primary immigration, although family members of settled migrants were still permitted. Prospective immigrants now needed to apply for a work voucher, which was graded based on the applicant's employment prospects. Family reunification was a major driver of Indian migration to the UK in the 70s and 80s. During this period, many migrants had already settled in the UK, and they wanted to bring their families over to join them. The UK government recognised the importance of family reunification and established policies and programmes to facilitate this process. One of the primary programmes that facilitated family reunification was the Family Reunification Scheme established in 1972. The scheme allowed for spouses and dependent children of Indian migrants to join them in the UK. The programme was then extended to parents in 1974 and allowed for the reunion of families on a larger scale. The family reunification scheme was a significant factor in driving Indian migration to the UK in the 70s and 80s. One of the most significant challenges was racism and discrimination, which was prevalent in British society at the time. Indian migrants were often subjected to verbal and physical abuse and were denied equal access to jobs, education, and housing. There are numerous news articles and reports that document the discrimination and prejudice faced by Indian migrants during this period. For example, a 1955 article in The Guardian describes the experiences of Indian workers in Wolverhampton, who were subject to racist attacks and discrimination by their employers and colleagues. The article notes that coloured workers feel that they are treated as second-class citizens. A 1968 report by the Runnymede Trust, a UK-based race equality think tank, describes the experiences of Indian migrants in the UK who face racialism, discrimination and prejudice in all areas of life. The report notes that Indian migrants were often denied access to jobs and housing and were subjected to racist abuse and violence. Additionally, the 1958 Notting Hill riots, also known as the Notting Hill race riots, were a series of racially motivated disturbances that occurred in the Notting Hill area of London, and they primarily targeted West Indian immigrants. These riots were fueled by growing tensions, economic competition and racial prejudice. The violence and discrimination faced by West Indian immigrants during this period were a stark reminder of the challenges and prejudices that they had to overcome in their pursuit of better lives in the UK. The Indian subcontinent communities in the UK responded to the challenges of racism and discrimination in a variety of ways, including activism, community organising and political engagement. Through their collective efforts, they were able to fight for equal rights and representation, and overall made significant progress towards addressing the inequalities faced by Indian migrants in the UK. Indian activists organised demonstrations and rallies, demanding an end to racism and discrimination and calling for a greater representation and equal opportunities for all. For example, in 1976, Indian activists organised a protest march in Southall, London, which drew thousands of participants and helped to draw attention to the discrimination and inequality faced by Indian communities in the UK. Indian communities also engaged in community organising and building. Indian community organisations were established in cities and towns across the UK, providing support and services to Indian migrants, overall advocating for their rights and needs. These organisations also played a key role in promoting Indian culture and heritage in the UK, and overall helped to build bridges between Indian communities and the wider society. Indian communities in the UK also engaged in political action by forming political parties and participating in elections, overall advocating for greater representation in government. For example, in 1987, the Labour Party in the UK elected Keith Vaz. He was the first Indian origin Member of Parliament, and Vaz's election marks a significant milestone for Indian communities in the UK, and majorly helped to pave the way for greater representation and participation in government. In our concluding chapter of this documentary, we delve deeper into the multifaceted impact of the 1950 Indian migration to the UK and its profound influence on the evolving South Asian diaspora in Britain. Seri Peach's 2006 analysis provides valuable insights into the specific regions of origin for various South Asian communities in the UK. Notably, around 80% of the British Pakistani population can trace their roots back to the Mirpur district in Pakistan. This geographical connection highlights the significant role these regions played in shaping the British Pakistani community. It's a testament to the resilience and determination of individuals who left their homeland in search of better opportunities, bringing with them a rich cultural heritage that continues to thrive in Britain. Similarly, over 80% of the British Bangladeshi population hails from the Sylhet district in Bangladesh. This concentration underscores the importance of this heritage within the British Bangladeshi community and its enduring cultural impact. This culture has played a pivotal role in shaping the community's traditions, languages and identity within the UK.
British Sikhs, to a significant extent, approximately 80%, have their origins in the Jalandhar district of Indian Punjab. This historical connection underscores the deep-rooted Sikh identity and heritage within the British Sikh community that we see today. Sikhism's values of equality, community service, and spirituality have had a profound impact on the British society. Indian Hindus, along with Indian Muslims, likely have around 70% of their population originating from the Gujarat state in India. The prevalence of Gujarati heritage has contributed to the cultural diversity and richness of the British Indian communities. The vibrant traditions, languages, and cuisines from the Gujarat have become integral parts of British cultural life. Peach's 2006 analysis also highlighted the specific regional origins of South Asian communities in the UK, underscoring the depth of their connections to their places of origin. This knowledge is crucial in understanding how these communities have preserved their unique cultures, traditions, and identities while contributing to the multicultural society of modern Britain. Beyond this cultural enrichment, it is essential to recognise the overall benefits of this migration. As we covered earlier, many of the early Indian immigrants played a crucial role in rebuilding post-war Britain. Today, South Asian entrepreneurs and professionals continue to bolster the UK's economy. The South Asian communities, with their diverse languages, religions, and traditions, have added immense richness and diversity to British culture. This infusion of cultural perspectives has fostered a more tolerant and inclusive society, promoting intercultural dialogue and understanding. The South Asian diaspora has played a vital role in strengthening social cohesion in the UK. Their community organisations, cultural festivals, and religious institutions provide vital support networks for individuals and families, contributing to an overall sense of belonging and stability. And over the years, South Asian individuals have made significant strides in British politics. Their presence in local and national government has ensured that the concerns and interests of their communities are represented, therefore promoting a more inclusive political landscape. As we conclude our exploration of the 1950 Indian immigration to the UK, it is clear that this migration wave has left an indelible mark on the cultural, social, and economic landscape of Britain. The South Asian diaspora, with its diverse roots, has not only contributed to the country's multicultural fabric, but has also played a pivotal role in shaping modern British society. Stories of resilience, adaptation, and cultural exchange from this era continue to inspire and serve as a testament to the enduring power of migration in shaping the world we live in today. This migration reminds us of the strength and resilience of all these individuals and communities who, against all odds, sought a better future and, in the process, enriched the tapestry of British culture and society.